Hello guys, I hope everybody is doing good. Can I get a quick confirmation on chat? If you guys are able to see me, hear me and see the screen properly. We're going to be talking about the important concepts or important topics for your upcoming FRM Level 1 exam, which is basically the May 2025 exam. Okay, so I hope everybody has been able to see me, hear me and see the screen. Can I get a quick confirmation on chat? Right? All good? Right, so I hope everybody is able to see me, hear me. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to be starting out with each book, each chapter, and I'm going to highlight few important sections from each chapter or each book, which you should be making sure that you are reading and revising it properly. Okay, so let us look at this first book. Okay, Foundation of Risk Management. Within that, we're looking at the first chapter. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so over here, from the first chapter, I have highlighted 3 sections, and out of that, the expected and unexpected loss section is very important. You have seen in the history the exam has been tested on this. Further, different key classes of risk. Now within this, the market risk and the credit risk part is very important. Okay, so that's why I've highlighted it as very important. Okay, this is from the first chapter of your book 1. As you move toward the second chapter, there is only 2 sections which I found slightly interesting for you to take care of it. For example, the risk appetite part, okay, and appropriate ways to hedge operational risk and financial risk, including the pricing part. Okay, so not very important this chapter. Okay, but still in the exam what we have seen is they have combined this chapter with the previous chapter and they have asked questions. Okay, let us move forward towards the next part, which is the corporate governance related chapter, which is chapter number 3. Okay, explain the corporate governance changes that we have seen from 2007 and 8 crisis. This concept has been tested in the past, so make sure that you're going through it properly. Okay, and what are the best practices in the corporate governance? Now there is 1.5 page in your book. Make sure that you read it properly because this is also very important. Next, there is a chapter which is credit transfer mechanism chapter. Now this topic is related to your mortgage and mortgage-backed security. Now over here, the basic securitization process and how do you create special purpose vehicle, that concept can get tested in the exam. Okay, and then what are the traditional approach or mechanism to mitigate credit risk? So they've talked about your syndication, netting. In that, all netting and syndication actually is being tested in one of the exam. So make sure that those concepts you have read properly. Modern portfolio theory, important. The chapter overall is important from the exam perspective. Over here, the CAPM basic assumption has to be clear to you guys. Okay, make sure that you know all the assumptions properly. Then the calculation of Sharpe and the Taylor ratio. Sharpe ratio, Taylor ratio is important. And how do you interpret this capital market line? Over here, if you remember, they have given you a capital market line and they are asking you where exactly are you the asset would be. Is it going to be above or is it going to be below? Okay, so that capital market line analysis has to be clear to everybody. From that perspective, this chapter is also important. Now this chapter, which is modern portfolio theory and your arbitrage pricing theory, okay, both of them are kind of connected. So over here, the APT theory has pharma French model, which is very important from the exam perspective. You have to make sure that those pharma French model, okay, the formula is very clear. What does each beta talks about? They have given you that in that chapter because this concept is also there in your level 2. Okay, so that's the reason I'm explicitly highlighting that you have to make sure that the pharma French model is good with your understanding. Okay, next, few assumptions also of the APT you can basically read. Principles of effective risk data aggregation, I've explicitly highlighted. Accuracy and integrity, this has been tested in the past exam. Okay, and completeness is also tested. So I've just taken 1 or 2 from that chapter to help you connect, because the chapter is slightly lengthy, slightly dry in reading. I know a lot of people don't like it reading, but that's the reason I've only asked to focus on these 2 principles. At the last, obviously this is from the revision perspective. When you're reading, you should ideally read the entire chapter. Okay, now When you go to the next part of the chapter, the second part of the chapter, I have highlighted few of them, but the timeliness and the review. Okay, I feel that these concepts can get tested in the future. Okay, I've not heard students talking about timeliness as a principle in their preparation, but I have explicitly highlighted few of them to connect back. Okay. Over here, the enterprise risk management chapter. Okay, in this, the benefit and the cost of ERM is very, very important, which can get tested in the exam, and also the dimensions. When you run an ERM program, what all things you need to remember, that also you need to be clear in your exam preparation. Learning from financial disaster, the chapter itself is very, very important. Okay, because in the exam, you'll find 2 questions minimum from this content, from this chapter. Okay, out of that, metal gazelle shaft has been tested in the past, very important. Northern rock, I had heard that in the last 2 exams it was tested, hence I have highlighted it here. Further, you have long-term capital management and Barings Bank, very, very important. So if you are in a hurry and you want to read this chapter, metal gazelle shaft, long-term capital management and Barings Bank, these 3 concepts you have to read by default. Okay, don't miss those topics. And last, the Swift case was also tested in the last 2 exams. So you have to make sure that you're good with what happened with the Bank of Bangladesh and what happened in terms of the cyber fraud. Okay. Anatomy of the Great Financial Crisis, the next chapter which is there in your book. Okay. Now over here, the impact of systematic risk. This is one learning objective from the chapter which is very, very important, that how the short-term funding market and all everything got connected and how it led to an overall systematic risk. Okay. So from the exam perspective, at least this learning objective you're supposed to be good with. Okay, then you have GARP code of conduct. Over here, the confidentiality part is being tested in the past exam. Conflict of interest has also been tested in the past exam. I have added this explicitly, the ethical conduct part, so that you can prepare better for the upcoming exam. But from the exam perspective, these 2 principles are very, very important. As we move towards the book 2, okay, the first chapter, fundamentals of probability. Over here, in the past 2 exams, what I've heard is people have got 3 questions. Okay, 3 questions, and out of those 3 questions, okay, 2 questions were slightly manageable, but 1 question was very, very tough. So whenever you look at fundamentals of probability topic, make sure that you have the understanding that okay, one question I might not be able to solve. Okay, so don't feel bad about it. Okay, out of that, the Bayes rule has been consistently being tested in the exam, consistently. Okay, so make sure that you are comfortable with that. I'll answer the query also. So Harshal, can I leave machine learning chapter book 2? Last chapter you can, if you really do not have time, but my suggestion would be at least read some important concepts which I'm going to highlight. Okay, how you tackle quant part? See, quant part, a lot of people are afraid that there's going to be a lot of calculation, but my dear friend, I feel that the quant part is going to be more or less theory. Out of 20, you will find 11 to 13 questions theory. Okay, it is more understanding based concepts that have been tested there. Okay, Aryan, good evening. Please also make a video for part 2 and hope you haven't forgotten about the podcast. Frankly speaking, I don't remember about the podcast, but you can put me that on WhatsApp. But for part 2, I might release this PDF. Okay, but might not be able to create a full video. Okay, I'll try to do something around it. Random variable, the next chapter from your FRM level 1. Okay, over here the quantile function is very, very important. Okay, mathematical expectation part of the random variable, slightly you should be comfortable with, you should read that. Okay, common univariate, overall the chapter is important. Okay, see, Poisson, normal distribution is very, very important, generally tested in all the exams. Normal distribution and standard distribution. Historically, Poisson was also getting tested. So these 3-4 topics, you have to make sure that you have to clear the exam. Okay, clear the exam with these 3-4 topics from this chapter properly. Okay, overall the chapter is important, so don't miss anything from this chapter as such. Multivariate random variable. Now this chapter is connected to your fundamentals of probability. If that part is clear, okay, then you'll be able to pick it up. Okay, marginal and conditional distribution, very, very important. This similar kind of table driven questions were also asked in your exam in the past. So make sure that you are comfortable with that. There's one formula also in that chapter which focuses on the variance of the portfolio. Okay, and that same formula is also there in other chapters also, but that variance of the portfolio formula is important from the exam perspective. Sample movement. Okay, law of large number, central limit theorem, double star, very, very important concept. Do not miss that. Again, quantile function, because in the last two exams, I've heard students getting a lot of questions around that. That's the reason I've highlighted it. Hypothesis testing, p-value, very important. Type 1, type 2, very, very important. Okay. So those concepts, because it is more understanding based thing that they are going to test from this chapter, they might ask you to do one hypothesis testing. Okay. But overall at that sectional level or the discussion level, these two concepts are more important. Type 1, type 2 error and your p-value. So make sure that you are comfortable with that. Okay. Linear regression, OLS and the assumptions of linear assumptions have been tested in the historically they have been tested in the exam. Okay, so assumptions of your OLS regression has to be good. Interpret the result of the OLS regression with the this is nothing but when you look at the ESS, TSS, all of these concepts properly, that is connected over here. So interpreting of the result is also important. Regression with multiple explanatory variable. Okay, so adjusted R square and its concept is important. And the F test, I've explicitly only put these two concepts. Okay, F test. Regression diagnostic. Now this chapter is very, very important from the exam perspective. Do not miss this chapter. Okay, because this heteroscedasticity, multicollinearity is generally tested. Especially I have highlighted heteroscedasticity part, and this VIF also is being tested. Straightforward, simple question on VIF has been asked in the exam. Time series, this chapter generally a lot of people find difficult. Okay, over here, what is covariance stationarity? Important. And moving average has been tested in the past exam, hence I have highlighted it as important. And the AR process. So basically, if you only remember the formula and the basic part of that process, then also it is okay. You don't need to go very deep in detail, even though the concept is very simple actually. Non-stationary time series. Okay, over here, seasonality part. You can focus on seasonality part and go through that content properly. Any queries, guys, you can put it on the chat. I'll be answering the query. Aryan, now I remember the conversation that we had. Okay, so don't worry. We will take a podcast of you. Measuring returns, volatility and correlation. Now from this chapter, the basic part, how do you use the square root formula? That concept is also tested. Okay. Then this JB test, it has been tested in the past exam. So I have explicitly highlighted it as star. Explicitly highlighted this as star. Okay. JB test, don't miss that concept. Okay. Candles tau, actually I have not heard much about it, but I have explicitly added it so that you go through that concept, because it is not very tough as such. But what you can focus is, if there is lack of time or if you're confused on this, don't take any pressure on the candles tau concept. Okay. The last chapter of your book third last chapter, which is simulation and bootstrapping. Okay. The Monte Carlo reduction of the error. So pseudo reduction number part, we have to take care of that. And the pseudo random number generator. Both of them are important from the exam perspective. Now bootstrapping, I have added because what I've heard that few students in the past two exams, they've got some concepts connected to bootstrapping. So I just want to make sure that you are reading that. And this chapter is easy. It's not very, very difficult as such, the way the name sounds like. Okay. Radha, I am answering to your query. Is book 4 more difficult than book 2? Obviously, it actually depends upon your background. But I generally find people struggling in book 2. Okay, not in book 4. Okay. Now the two chapters which we were talking about, the machine learning models and the prediction part. Okay. The K-means algorithm, this section you need to remember. Okay. Overfitting, underfitting is very, very important. Mark this as star, double star, and then explain the mechanics of the natural language processing aspect. Okay. So you can read, this is just for reading, but these middle two learning objective, you have to be very good with the concept. Machine learning and prediction. Over here, The last part, predictive performance. This is very, very important. So do not skip that. There is a calculation also. And I think so in one of the chapter there is Euclidean distance. Okay, I don't think so I've explicitly marked it, but that calculation has also been tested in the past exam. Okay. Now we're going to be starting out with book 3. Any queries, guys, you can put it on the chat section and I'll address the query. Okay. The intention of this chapter is to basically make sure that you get the important concepts which you can prepare properly for the exam and clear the exam. Let us go to the next part, which is your book 3. Okay, banks. Okay, now over here, Dutch auction process has been tested in the past exam, and the concept of moral hazard. Important, read it properly, do it properly for the exam. Okay, insurance companies and pension fund, there is this ratio. Okay, expense ratio, interest ratio, that basic calculation. You can find some numerical question also coming in, and over here the premium payment to the policy holder. Okay, you can read that also. Using mortality table, there have been some questions in the part in the exam. Next, fund management, very, very interesting. Okay, over here the high watermark clause and clawback. In one of the students, he told me that he got a calculation based question on this, which generally they don't ask. Okay, so that has been also highlighted. And this part, undesirable trading behavior, this was a favorite of the institute few years, and they have been asking consistent questions on late trading, then front running, all of these different concepts. Derivative, introduction to derivatives part, the hedging and the speculative part, because if you read the entire chapter, these are the only two topics which are slightly tricky. Rest everything is very basic. The basics of option, basics of futures and forwards. So I just highlighted these concepts directly, even though I have not heard that these concepts are directly asked in the exam. Because if I want to test you on option, I can ask you a question from exotic option and the basics will be cleared, ideally, right? Look at the next chapter, which is exchange and OTC market. Now over here, the risk associated with OTC. Okay, this is important. Mark this as very, very star market. Okay, important star mark. Central clearing. Okay, explain the type of risk over here. Your VMGH concept is there, your credit risk is there, investment risk is there, important from that perspective, and what is happening in terms of loss mutualization, what is happening in terms of auction, and what happens in terms of default. All of that basic terminology part has to be cleared. Okay, any queries, guys, you can put it on the chat section. Let us move toward the futures part. Over here, the margin, historically the margin calculation, the similar question that you have in your book, the similar content was also being asked in the historic exam. Okay, so you can refer to that also, very, very easy, important. And the features of the futures contract, which ideally as a FRM student, you should be aware about those features. Using futures for hedging, mark this entire chapter as double star. Almost all the concepts in this chapter are very, very important. Okay, so over here, the most important is the optimal hedge ratio. You will find a calculation plus theory question. So in the option, you will have theory plus calculation explicitly given. Okay, and the concept of basis risk has also been historically tested. 3-4 years back, they were testing it heavily. Now I don't hear about it as the concept that is being tested. How to adjust portfolio beta stock, double star, very, very important. Students have been asked these kind of questions, similar kind of question which you see in the book. Foreign exchange, okay, foreign exchange chapter, very unique chapter. Over here, this part, the different types of risk, economic risk, translation, they might give you a scenario that two countries, which country is facing translation risk and how transaction risk and how, likewise they can ask you a question. Then you have interest rate parity, also very, very important. The formula and the calculation is important. Pricing financial forwards and futures, important. The entire chapter is important. Formula driven questions, calculation based questions can come from your book 3 from this chapter. Okay, over here they are asking you to calculate the forward price and then forward foreign exchange rate. Okay, what was that? S0 into 1 plus R, which is the quoted, 1 plus R, which is base, raised to T, right? That is going to give you the future value of the currency. So all of that concept is also there. Next is commodity forwards. This is actually continuation with the previous chapter. because previous chapter is talking about the investment management risk. Over here, they are talking about the commodity as an asset. Over here, the lease rate and conveniency, both are important, heavily important, tested in the actual exam. Option markets, effect of dividend has been tested in the past exam, so I am explicitly highlighting that. Properties of option, again a very important chapter. Theory, more or less theory, few very easy calculations can come, which is formula driven. Okay, over here the put call parity, like everybody knows who is preparing for the exam, put call parity is very important. The factors, they might ask you, giving three, four different scenarios, how when there is a change in volatility and also the change in say for example the asset price, how the price of the option will change. Likewise, they can ask you questions over here. And the pricing bond of the European option is also very important. Trading strategy, butterfly option has been historically their favorite. Then they started asking heavily on bull and bear spread. This is what I've seen from this chapter in the past few exams. Exotic option, now over here they have asked about gap option. Okay, they have asked about the barrier option and Asian option historically in the actual exam. This is what I've heard from students when I asked them after the exam what topics were there, what concepts have been tested. So this is what I've heard a lot. Okay, with respect to properties of interest rate, somewhere related to your bond evaluation. Okay, so over here the FRA and the duration convexity, the formula of duration adjustment, convexity adjustment, both of them are important. So do not miss that. Okay, do not miss that, guys. Corporate bond, slightly theoretical. Okay, but when you're reading, focus on the default risk part and the way the bond can be retired. Now over here, there is the concept of your, I forgot that section which talks about retiring the bond every year. So that section is very important. I don't remember the name now, but that you can read this entire learning objective properly. Mortgage and mortgage-backed security, this part, SMM CPR, historically been tested, favorite of the institute. The calculation part, simple, easy calculations are there, important. Okay, then you have this principal only, interest only security, important. Okay, and to a certain extent in the past exams, I have also heard about the TBA as a concept that has been tested. Then there is one more which is dollar roll, which I have not written. That dollar roll concept was also getting tested, okay, in the actual exam. So over here, kind of, we have reached towards the end of the book. Last chapter, interest rate futures, cheapest to deliver, very important. Duration based hedge ratio is also being tested, and this day count convention. Day count convention in the actual exam, I've heard a lot of theory being coming. Rather than the calculation, theory is being asked in the actual exam. I am going to answer the query. Indu, I have exam scheduled for May 2025, but I have actually forgot almost entirely book 2 and VAR chapter. See, actually what happens now, this is a common problem. When you keep on reading, solving, when you reach towards like 40-50 chapters, you forget. The easiest thing to do is obviously to revise, but go and solve the chapter question bank again, once, very fast. Okay, don't worry about getting the right answer, wrong answer. Just go through that, so it will kick in a lot of concepts which you have understood while solving. You should ideally do that. Okay, can I pass if I score between 50 to 55 score? See, historically, I have heard students scoring between 50 to 55 clearing, but my recommendation would be to score above 60. 60 is a very safe number to go clear the exam. Okay, will this video be posted? Yes, it will be on the YouTube channel. You can access it, don't worry. Okay, swaps. Okay, now if you go 3-4 years back, swaps related calculation questions were heavily tested. Okay, this valuation of VAR, that's the reason I've added it over here, but now they are more theoretically testing the actual exam question. Mostly they're talking about the comparative advantage. So make sure that you are good with both the valuation part and the comparative advantage part. Comparative advantage is more theory in basic. Okay, next, this is kind of a repeat. Now we are entering into book 4. Any queries, guys, you can post it on the chat and I'll address the queries for you directly. Next is VAR measure. Okay, now this chapter overall is important from the exam perspective because it gives you the basics of expected shortfall calculation. Okay, they might give you some series of data in that you have to calculate, not the formula. I'm talking about calculation, taking the average of the data points above VAR, that can be calculated. that can be asked in the actual exam. Coherent risk measure has been actively tested in the exam. So make sure that you're good with that. Over here, the historical simulation part, this is very, very important. Mark this as star. The next chapter, measuring and monitoring volatility, EWM and GARCH calculation. Okay, in EWM, I think so there is a calculation for covariance also. Make sure that all of these formulas are very, very important and you have good understanding about it. Okay, historical simulation method also, make sure that you're good with that, because this is connected with the first chapter of your book 4. Mark that as star. External internal rating. Okay, historically rating metrics has been favorite of the institute. Every student almost was getting that question. Okay, calculation of expected loss to a certain level, and also in the external internal rating, I think so this is not from this chapter, there was a typo, but in the external internal rating there is a hazard rate calculation. That hazard rate calculation, please make sure that you know the formula. Okay, from this chapter of country risk, starting part is very theoretical, slightly boring also. The last part, the sovereign credit spread and how you use it, that part is important, so I'm marking it as star. Measuring credit risk, important chapter, especially for these two calculations. Okay, and in the past exam, Weiszak model has also been tested. So mark this as star. Weiszak model, expected unexpected loss. Operational risk chapter, theory, but there is some part which is related to modeling. Okay, in the actual exam, the large operational risk section important. Then you have the last part, the common data related inconsistencies. So you have to do standardization, scaling, okay, cleaning of the data. All of this has been explained. There is one sum also in that concept where they do scaling and try to understand what as a percentage of your revenue, how much you should keep capital. That part is also important. Now some calculation is there. So make sure that you are good with that. Stress testing, validation and independent review has been tested in the past exam as a concept. Then Basel II related principles. So make sure that you read these concepts also properly. Pricing convention, we are now going to enter into bond valuation. Okay, clean price, dirty price is a concept, because that is the last section and that is also connected to your interest rate futures topic, right? So make sure that you are good with that concept. Interest rate chapter, which is a bond valuation chapter. Over here, this flattening and steepening has been tested in, they'll give you a diagram and they will ask you to analyze what has happened to the yield curve. Is it become flattening? Then there is a bull call, bull flattening, bear flattening. That concept is also tested over here. Bond return yield. Now over here, the Japanese yield has been tested in the past exam. Carry roll down the scenarios have been tested. So that carry roll down is slightly big. You have to read it properly. Okay, that will help you a lot, because you might find one question connected to that concept also. Applying DV01 duration, this entire chapter is important, so don't skip this chapter. Okay, because historically barbell portfolio they were testing heavily. Okay, then there is duration convexity concept, which was also there in your properties of interest rate, so make sure that that is important. The basic understanding of DV01, everything from this chapter is almost important, so do not skip this chapter. Modeling non-parallel shift, over here only the key rate shift is what you can focus. If you're not comfortable in this chapter, don't take the pressure. Only the key rate shift, which has the key rate duration, key rate 01, you understand that concept. Look at the formula also, even though the formula is almost similar to what you have seen for normal duration, so don't worry much. Okay, the concept should be very clear. Binomial tree. Now we are entering into the last 3 chapters of your curriculum. We are talking about the bond valuation. Okay, now in the actual exam, they might ask you a 2-step binomial model. Generally, they will ask you 1 step. Okay, but if they want to make this question slightly tough, they will ask you a 2-step model. Okay, so you should be comfortable with the calculation of your pi u, pi d, which is up probability, down probability. Then what are the chances that how the prices will move, how the tree will get created. All of that concept has to be clear. Black-Scholes-Merton model. Okay, Black-Scholes-Merton model, over here the assumptions of Black-Scholes model has been tested in the past, and the calculation, the basic formula of BSM model has to be clear to you guys. Okay, the last chapter, option Greeks. Over here, the delta, the calculation of delta, the delta neutral strategy, and gamma neutral. All of these parts are important. This has been tested in the past, especially the delta hedging part. There were, I think so, 2-3 pages on that. Make sure that you're comfortable with that, okay, and you know the basic approach of doing the delta neutral portfolio. Very important. Okay, so I have covered all the 62 chapters which is there in your book for your FRM level 1 exam. I know this entire journey has been really very different for you guys. Each student has their own approach towards the exam, okay, but ultimately who has been able to stick to the exam till the end, has not lost that hope, has been able to consistently get up and prepare every single day, those are the students who have been able to clear the exam. Okay, and do not lose hope. Even if you're getting lower scores, do not lose hope. Make sure that you don't repeat that mistake, because it is not necessary that your exam is going to be very tough. Okay, certain concepts which are easy, that might also get tested in your exam, so don't lose hope over there. So thank you very much guys for joining in. I hope this video helps you in your preparation and you are able to clear the exam. If you have any queries, you can reach us over here on this WhatsApp number. We'll try to help you out as soon as possible. Okay, this is your WhatsApp number. Okay, so thank you very much guys for joining in. We'll keep on coming up with more such session for your upcoming exam. Okay, so thank you very much. Bye guys, take care.